Back in 1999, I was part of a small, classified military operation stationed in the desert of Southern California. Deep below us, they were conducting experiments that I was told were very similar to that of modern-day CERN. Not quite on the same scale of particle acceleration, but in the same vein. For the record, I sometimes wonder if what was going on down there had anything to do with the frequent activity we experienced here. We were tasked with testing out new military equipment and vehicles, as well as training for upcoming missions. One evening, we all of a sudden heard this loud screeching sound coming from the sky. All of us there were met with confusion when we saw it. It was flying over us, but it wasn't an airplane or a chopper. It was some sort of craft made out of bright balls of light, and it was making this terrible screeching noise as it flew directly over us. We decided to retreat into the barracks to get away from whatever that thing was. But it followed. It hovered over the main base for a few moments, then flew away. We all thought it was over, but we were wrong. It continued to come back, this time landing right outside, and out of the door of the side of this craft came these creatures. If I had to guess from memory, they were roughly 5 feet tall and had this greenish, sickly-looking skin. They looked like lizards with human-like features, to put it simply. We all had our weapons ready, pointing in their direction. They started towards us, and then they spoke to us in this bizarre language. We could not understand anything they were saying, and shortly, weapons were fired. This immediately made them retreat back into the craft, although I know for a fact several rounds had to have hit them, although they all appeared completely unharmed and unaffected. This happened immediately after the first sighting, or what I'm about to tell you, is that specifically we were told by our superiors that what we saw was highly classified, and we were to never speak about it again. I know what I saw, and I know that those lizard people are real, whatever you want to call them. Over the years, I've been able to keep friends close and gain considerable intel on these things. What I can tell you is that there is an active cover-up happening. 2 of them were taken to a very high security clearance area, deep underground. I didn't see them for around 5 months. When they returned, they had zero memory of the events that got them down there in the first place. I think these lizard entities are real, and that they're here on Earth. I know that there is a lot more to the story, but I can't tell you any more. All I can say is that these things are real and they are here. The place you need to start looking is underground. I'd like to share a frightening experience that I had just a few years ago. Although it wasn't on the Navajo reservation, it did occur on another tribal land. Years ago, 2 inexplicable events took place that have left me just completely blown away and unsettled. They were identical in every respect, and I've never found a satisfactory explanation for their occurrence. I'm not sure if you're interested in these types of stories, but I assumed I'd share them with you anyway. The first incident occurred in the summer of 2005. My wife and I were living up on the Fort Apache reservation here in Arizona. We had just moved into a new house, located right on the outskirts. The house was situated at the end of a long dirt road running through some pockets of dense forestation. It was, for the most part, very secluded, very private. We liked that a lot. It allowed us to enjoy our privacy, and I mean, who doesn't enjoy their privacy? We wouldn't have to worry about nosy neighbors or prying eyes. One night, my wife and I were sitting outside on our front porch, enjoying the cool evening air. We heard something moving around inside our yard. We thought it might be a deer or some other animal. We didn't think much about it until we heard what sounded like footsteps crunching across the gravel leading right up to our house. We both looked at each other. Puzzled expressions wore on our faces. We tried to figure out what could be making those sounds. It's clear there were no vehicles parked nearby, and nobody else, since the gate is locked down at the entrance, should have been able to be up here walking around, especially now at night. I reached for my pistol, which I kept on me, and slowly approached the driveway with my flashlight in hand. And let me tell you, I was ready to blast anything that might be lurking around. I shined the light around, but didn't see anything. And then we both heard more footsteps, but this time running away from us. Whatever it was, it sounded clearly like 2 legs and not 4. It also made a strange grunting noise as whoever or whatever it was took off very quickly. We stood there for a moment trying to figure out what it could have been. And then we heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It sounded like a woman, but she was crying, and it was definitely coming from the forest. It was a very mournful and pitiful sound. It sounded like it might have come from a woman who is in great pain or distress. I told my wife we need to get inside right now. The sound reminded me of something I heard in Mexico when I got lost in the desert, but that's another story for another time. I didn't want to find out what might be lurking around our property, so I hurried back inside, locking the doors. I called the police, and they'd said they'd come investigate. In the time while waiting, we sat awake, just listening for any sounds. Anything to indicate what might have been outside. But it was dead silent. Not even the crickets were singing their usual songs. When the officer arrived about 12 minutes after the call, I told him everything. The footsteps, the crying sound. He seemed concerned, but he also seemed to believe us. He told us he would go take a look. He shined his flashlight around, looked out back, but after about a 20-minute search of the perimeter, he didn't see anything. So we just assumed it might have been an animal or probably some kids playing a prank on us. Anyway, he gave us his card in case it continued. We both knew that wasn't true though, because there were no kids around our house. No teenagers, mind you. And I was pretty sure this wasn't a regular animal. I mean, we had never heard or saw anything else that night, so we just chalked it up to an animal and decided to move on with life after debating what it could have been. Now, the second incident occurred about 2 months later, now in the fall of 2005. If I remember correctly, it was roughly 9:30 at night. We were once again sitting outside on the front porch. We were having a nice little talk about our day and watching the stars when we heard the same footsteps and crying sounds from the previous couple months. This time, it was much louder and seemed far more intense. It sounded like it was coming from the forest 50 yards to the south. We both got up in reaction, running inside. But this time, we didn't hear any sounds. Everything seemed to immediately quiet down. I told my wife that I was going to go investigate and see once and for all what was behind it. She seemed incredibly frightened and did not hide it. She attempted to talk me out of it, but I insisted that this needed to be done, and I had to know. I had to know because it had scared both of us. She reluctantly agreed. I grabbed my pistol and flashlight, searching outside. The crying was still audible, but it seemed to be coming from a different area than before, like it was moving. I kept shining it around, but couldn't see anything. So, I decided to go deeper into the forest, where we thought the sound was coming from, in order to get a better idea of what it might have been. When I got to the forest, I didn't hear anything, but I could still hear the crying coming from a distance. It sounded like it was now coming in the direction as one of the mountains near the reservation. The crying continued for about 15 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it had started. After that, we didn't see or hear anything else that night. So after not finding anything, no tracks, no evidence of anybody being out there, I just went back inside. My wife and I were both too wound up, so we sat up most of the night, listening in case something happened. No, I did not call the police officer back. We never heard anything else. It's truly something so strange and bizarre, I really have no way to explain it away. Anytime I've gone into those woods since this happened, I just get the utter creeps, and I feel like something is looking at me. I used to work as a police officer, and I've been following your work for a while now. I would like to tell you about an encounter my wife and I had. It was back in the summer of 2013. We were having our evening walks with our two dogs. They are both Rottweilers. The older one is a female. She's about 5 and the male is 3. We were walking down our road. It was maybe 8:25, 8:30. We were usually heading home, because this is the time my wife has to start getting ready for bed for her job the next morning. We also live on a dead-end street, so we always try to let the dogs get their runs out. We were walking down the road. The female dog was running ahead of us. She's always a little bit more wound up. And all of a sudden, we heard this growling behind us, but we couldn't think much of it. There are plenty of rabbits and stuff in the area, so it's possible my dog just saw that. So my wife turns around to see what the dog is growling or barking at, and that's when she sees something. She freezes, and I hear her say, "What the hell is that?" I looked around, saw this thing on 2 legs running toward us. It was huge. At least 6 foot, or if not more, brown hair covering its body like a wild man. I thought it was a wild man. I've watched enough National Geographic to know that's what it looks like. Huge hands, huge feet, with a mouth open, showing large teeth like an animal. It ran past us, turning around to face us. We were only about 25 yards away from it at this point, and it started to run toward us again, making a sound like a roar, not like a dog barking. I've never heard anything like it before or since. My wife was screaming. I reached for my weapon, but my female dog came running back toward us, so I had to turn around and watch this thing. It stopped, responding to my female dog turning around. It made another sound like a roar. I was beyond terrified, but I had to hold it together and get my wife home. She was hysterical. I spent all my time telling her I'd keep her safe and that nothing would happen. I didn't dare tell her that I was just as scared. I don't recall getting much sleep that first night, but the following morning, once daylight broke, I thought it would be a good idea, against my better judgment, to see if I can find tracks. After all, I needed to know exactly just what I was dealing with. Did we even really see anything? Did we have some sort of conjoined psychosis? I mean, hey, these things might be possible. Even to manifest the hallucination that our dogs reacted as well. To my utter dismay, it had rained heavily over the night. There was nothing to find, no tracks, no evidence. I was very disheartened. I even went back the following day, hoping to find something. I didn't see anything. Since then, though, we've been really apprehensive about walking our dogs around that area. There also aren't any lights around our house over there, just because it's undeveloped, and they never did finish it. If they plan to, of course. Part of me's terrified this thing will come and rip our roof off. I'm not joking. I'm serious. This thing is real. It's around here. It's in our area. I understand the Bigfoot cryptid phenomenon is much more complex than we give it credit for. One thing that's been really bothering me a lot with my career is that my life would be in jeopardy if I gave my name and attached it to this publicly. I would be ridiculed, laughed at. I'm an officer, an ex-officer. Over time, I've begun to accept what's real and what is. There's a lot of wooded areas around here, and we are close to a large river with plenty of wildlife coming to drink. I'm convinced there are a lot of things out there we don't know about. I have no idea why the government would be involved in it, but I have a feeling they are. I'm convinced. There have been sightings now, I'm sure, all over. It's only a matter of time before somebody gets proof and changes the world.